Let's make my Mirage quilt pattern using a layer cake. Layer cakes are 10-inch squares, and for this pattern you will need 42 10-inch squares, which will yield you a 57-inch by 56-inch quilt. If you use 70 10-inch squares, you will yield a twin size quilt measuring at 66.5 inches by 80 inches, just to give you a few more options. With each layer cake 10-inch square, you will cut two 2.5-inch by 10-inch rectangles and one 5-inch by 10-inch rectangles. And that's it. You'll just repeat these same steps to every single layer cake 10-inch square. Once everything is cut, it is time to sew it all back together. First, you will grab two different prints in the 2.5-inch by 10-inch rectangles and sew them together with a 1/4-inch seam allowance. This will leave you with a 4.5-inch by 10-inch rectangle. Once your strip sets are made, you will cut your 5-inch by 10-inch rectangles into a 4.5-inch by 10-inch rectangles. Now, if you are a beginner, I highly recommend measuring your strip set first, then cut your 5-inch by 10-inch rectangle to the exact same size. But once again, it should measure as a 4.5-inch by 10-inch rectangle for your strip set. But once everything is trimmed down, you will sew the 4.5-inch by 10-inch rectangle to your strip set with a 1/4-inch seam allowance. And this will leave you with a 8.5-inch by 10-inch quilt block. Then all you have to do is repeat this step until you have made enough for the quilt size you selected. Now that all of your blocks are made, you will lay them out in a 6x7 block layout or a 7x10 block layout for the twin size quilt. You will lay your blocks with the strip set towards the top for every odd column. Then for your even columns, you will place the strip set towards the bottom. Then as always, you will sew your blocks together to form rows. And lastly, sew your rows together to complete your quilt top. And here's what my quilt top looks like all finished. Mirage is a great beginner-friendly quilt pattern that you'll be able to whip up in no time. And this is perfect for any last-minute gifts or if you need a large bed-size quilt. For the backing, I am using a print from within the collection. Then for the thread choice, I am going with glide threads in the color Mercury. And here's what my quilt looks like all quilted. Once again, one layer cake will yield you a 57-inch by 56-inch quilt. And if you use two layer cake bundles and instead make a total of 70 quilt blocks while placing them in a 7x10 block layout, you will yield a twin size quilt measuring at 66.5 inches by 80 inches, just to give you a few more options. But if you could, please take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you can be notified for your next amazing quilt project.